Hey y'all, Ryan Davis, Home Improved Man. We're going to talk about finishing a window. So in this situation, old window was taken out, new window's been put in, at a replacement window, as they're often called, and we have this roughness around the edge. What we need to do here is to build it out, to put in some wood to bring everything to the edge of the wall, and then we'll put in the casing, the trim, around the window. You want to build it out so that it comes flush to the existing wall, and at the same time hide this ugly house wrap and the insulation. So, what you need to do is to put in some 1x material. We've already measured it out, and we measured it to 1.5. One and 3/4. Measured it to 1 3/4. And I've already cut the wood to being the correct width. I had to cut back a bit of this drywall here because it was hanging down, and I want this to be able to end up pushed up against it. So up against the wood framing, so that this will then go flush. I want it to go flush to the window. I want it to go flush to the wall. And so the dimensions of this is very important. You want to make sure it's exact all the way around. The other thing that you want to do is that you want to have it fit cleanly against each other. So take your time, measure correctly, measure all the dimensions. Measure not just this side, measure this side, because it might be a different gap. There was, I think, 1/4 inch between the top and the bottom, where it moved slightly. So definitely make sure that you have the correct dimensions, measure everything fully across. Then we put it into place. You don't need a nailer, but it sure makes your job a lot easier. If you don't have one of these, you're going to use just a basic trim nail. I don't recommend the screw because the screw is going to have a larger head. They do make trim screws, but in this case it's a little more work than you need to. When you go, if you find that you have to use a hammer to knock some of this piece, the wood in place, if there's small taps, you can go ahead and go directly hammer onto the wood. But if you feel like you need to put a little bit of weight behind it, use another piece of wood to make sure that you don't damage, mar the wood. Pine is very soft. Most of the trim that you're going to have will be made of pine, and so it's easy to damage it, and you don't want to have the marks of the hammer on the wood when you're finished. So if you were paying attention, you saw me really struggling with a piece of wood down there, and that's because, as I mentioned just a moment ago, that I had a different distance, top to bottom, and I was trying to stick the piece that's supposed to go up top down onto the bottom. And so this one is about a 1/4 inch longer than the piece I just put in. And here, you can see it's snug, but it should fit. That's the first step. The second step will be to put the casing around it. Now, even if you're using a pneumatic nailer, whether it's an air compressor or battery powered, or you're putting in the nails by hand, the old-fashioned way, chances are you're going to have to go and set the nails, and you'll need a nail setter to be able to drop the nails back into the hole, which I will show you right now. This is a nail set. The other thing that we're going to need is a little bit of putty, some filler. So first I'm going to make sure the nails are below the surface of the wood, and then I'm going to fill all the holes. You'll also notice I painted the wood before I put it in place. I find that a whole lot easier. Once I'm done filling the holes, sand it down, and then I just need to put a little bit of paint around where the nail was, and it's done. I find this a lot easier than trying to paint once it's all in place. Before we get into the casing, the decorative trim that goes around the edges of it is a great time to double check that everything looks good. The more accurate, the tighter your joints are here, the easier it's going to be to finish things up. Oftentimes we'll take the approach of saying I could be a little rough here because I can make up for any sloppiness here at the final stages. And while that is true to a degree, it's easier to do spend the extra time here than try and make up for it at the end stage. Fairly tight, a very small bead of caulk, and that'll tighten right up. And even though the gap on this side is a little bigger, the trim, the casing is going to hide that, make it disappear. So this should be a fairly easy one. The only problem I'm going to run into here is that down on the bottom, let me turn this. Standard trim is 2 1/4 inches. This is 2 inches. And you add in a 1/8 inch reveal, which we'll talk about on the next step. And now I have 1 7/8, which means that I'm going to be cutting my trim back in order to finish it. Another option would be to run the trim straight down to this bench here, and then to put another piece of 1x right across the front edge. And I've changed my mind. That's how I'm going to do that now. I think it'll look a little bit better rather than having that weird piece of trim down at the bottom. The other advantage of doing it this way is it's going to be more stable. That weird piece of trim that's cut short would be unstable down there at the bottom, very easy for it to collapse inward. So change of plan, which means I now need a piece of the inside width, 50 3/4 inches. The trim, 2 1/4. I've got one piece on each half, which means I have 4 1/2 inches of trim on either side, or total combined. 50 3/4, 4 1/2, 54, 55 1/4. But you want to have, we're going to finish up with what we call a reveal, which means that there's going to be a little bit of this 1x4 or 1x that's going to be exposed on either side. A 1/8 inch reveal on this side and on that side. I totally forgot what my numbers are now. I'm going to do it again. 50 3/4. 4 1/2 inches of trim. 54, 55 1/4. 2 8-inch reveals, which is 1/4 inch total reveal. 55 1/2. Now, I'm going to go, once I turn off the camera here, do it again on paper and actually write that out to make sure I get it correctly, because I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to throw out that wood and start over again. But if my math is correct, I need a 1x2, which means I'm trimming it down, 55 1/2 inches. Painted, of course. Trimming out a window, part 2. So in the previous segment, which will be almost instantaneous from where you are now. Much time has passed on my side. I changed my mind. I was originally going to put the trim all the way around, including the bottom. As I was setting it up, I realized it's going to be there's a more effective method to approach or to deal with this, and that would be to put a piece of 1x, basically 1 by 1, is the gap that I have once I put the bottom plate in. Putting a 1 by down there, it'll look much better, it'll be more effective. And I think it illustrates one of the points here, which is that always be able to change on the fly when you realize there's a better solution along the way. But also, you might get far enough along in the project that it's actually advantageous not to. Now, in this case, all I had to do was pop out the one that I had already placed in there, and then to paint some new pieces, and then to measure them in place, and I'm now about to nail it in. Now, the way that I'm doing it, I have this piece right here is going to slide in like so. I have extended it so it goes beyond the gap and extends out to where the trim will meet it. Typically, we extend a little bit beyond the trim, but it's really up to you how you want to handle it. The bottom piece is this one. And this will sit snugly between my bottom stool and this bench that's in place right here. This piece is not going to extend all the way to the ends. I cut it about a ½ inch short. I put a small angle on the edge here, so you can see. Very small, slightly decorative. One of the advantages to not bringing everything flush is that if you're off a little bit, it won't be as noticeable. But also, when you have wood that butts up against another piece of wood, there's always going to be a little bit of a seam. No matter how effective you are at cutting accurately, there's always going to be a little bit of a seam. And so this will negate the need or the visual chaos that such a thing would occur. So this will fit underneath. Pretty much that. You can see there's a little bit of a gap, and I will bring the quarter round all the way up to it. And this is this gap right here. I didn't want to extend the piece underneath all the way out to where the quarter round ends. It would have been visually unappealing, so I'm not going to do that. But once I nail this in place, then we'll put the trim in, and then we'll see about finishing up the edges. Now, in typical construction, you would extend this stool, what is commonly referred to as the sill, but the sill is an inaccurate word. The sill is underneath the windows itself. But this horizontal piece here, you would typically extend it out a little bit beyond the trim on the bottom side. I did not, for the simple reason that it would start to cover up this bench here, and I want this bench to be as accessible and as useful as possible, so I kept it fairly flush. You can see a bit of a gap between the two, but caulk will take care of that. Be patient and careful with your measurements, but keeping in mind that if you have minor inconsistencies, caulk will be able to fill in some of those gaps and make you look like a better carpenter than perhaps you are. So I'm not too worried about the gaps that are there. They'll all be able to be filled in. We have trim. So we measure the inside of the window frame. We add 1/8 of an inch to have a bit of a reveal. We add 2 1/4 inches for the width of the trim. And then we end up like so. Now, of course, before you put it into place, you dry fit it to make sure that it's correct. Make sure you didn't measure incorrectly. I've already done that once before I turned on the camera, discovered that I made one incorrect cut and went down and cut another one. So I give the illusion that I cut everything perfectly the first time, and I've already checked it to make sure that it fits. Now, I have, in a different video, gone through the process of showing how to use the glue to put in the casings around doors and windows. If you've ever done this sort of work, then you know one of the hardest aspects is to get the corner seams to look perfect. And if you're newer to the business, you know that's going to be your biggest challenge. I'm going to show you a trick. So I'm not going to walk through the details of it. You can look at the other video for it, but I will just show you how the process of using the glue. Basically, I glue the corners on the ground where the ground is flat, and then I put the whole assembled 3 pieces up to the wall, and then I nail it into place. Everything's glued in place, and now all we have to do is to nail it. I want to be a little bit careful that I don't twist or torque it too much with the glue on the corners, but they should hold fairly securely. All I need to do is to set the corners so that there is a 1/4 inch reveal, or I'm sorry, 1/8 of an inch reveal, so that there's an 1/8 of an inch showing on the piece of wood of the casing here, or I'm sorry, the 1x around the edges, and then I'll have it evenly all the way across. It doesn't matter if it's exactly 1/8 of an inch. What matters is that it's basically even all the way across, whatever that dimension is. Nail it into place, and then then we're good to go. So, we're done. We have everything there. The few things I have left to do, I need to fill the nail holes. I need to caulk the trim, let all of that dry, the filler and the caulk, and then I can go and paint it. The 1x I've already painted, but I need to touch up where the nail holes are going to be filled. The casing, I bought primed, and so I still need to put a coat of paint on that. There's a few gaps here, and on the other corner, where the quarter round that is filling that is being used up on top, it hasn't been completed because the old window is not exactly the same dimensions as the new window. So I'll just complete it with some quarter round. But overall, I'm really happy with it. This the best window I've done, the best window I've trimmed out, and of course that speaks to the more you do it, the better you get, the better it looks. So if you're only doing this, once every couple of years, a window here, a door later, or 2 years from now, you're doing something else, you're always going to be a little rusty. So try to keep your skills up so that when it comes time to do the trim work, you're at the top of your game. And in terms of the quality of the work or the quality of the craftsmanship, As you get tighter, as you get closer to things like cabinetry work, the more accurate you need to be. Framing, you can be rough. You can be as much as 1/8 of an inch, even 1/4 inch off, and still make it look pretty good. The trim, if you're 1/8 of an inch off, it's probably going to show. And when you get down to cabinetry, 1/16 is visible. So if you're newer to it, start off with the rougher work, and then as your skills grow, get more refined with the type of work that you're doing. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you found it valuable, and if you did, like it, share it, subscribe, and enjoy all of your projects.